The moving truck hadn't even cooled when Logan Pierce spotted the first pair of eyes watching from across the street. Two neighbors stood beneath trimmed hedges, pretending to chat. Their voices never carried. Their eyes never left his house. Logan didn't mention it to Sarah. She was already in love with the front porch, the backyard swing, the sunlight through the kitchen. They'd worked for this, earned it. Years of deployments, long silences, and a career he never talked much about. This was supposed to be peace. But Cypress Hollow had rules, and not all of them were written. The welcome packet came with a smile from the HOA president, Diane Keller. She spoke like a school principal, sharp, cheerful, controlling. "We pride ourselves on order here," she told Sarah. "No surprises, no messes, no drama." Logan's handshake lasted too long. She studied his eyes. Her smile faded for half a breath. Then she retreated, pamphlet in hand, and left the driveway like a general inspecting troops. The first violation notice arrived that same week, folded neatly. No envelope. Tucked just inside the front screen door. Unapproved mailbox post. Black ink, no signature. No contact name. Logan stared at it for a moment before dropping it in a drawer. 2 days later, another notice. Fence, height discrepancy. Review required. It hadn't changed since the inspection, but this time it came taped to the side gate. He didn't like the taping. That meant someone came into the yard. That night, he walked the perimeter. Grass soft underfoot. Soil disturbed by the southwest fence post. Bootprint, size 11. Worn. Tread. Not a neighbor's casual stroll. Someone had come close enough to touch. He installed motion lights the next day. 3. Spaced evenly across the backyard. The kind that didn't blink on, just came alive, blinding and immediate. He didn't ask permission. Didn't file a form. Just mounted them himself. Sarah raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She trusted the way he moved. Trusted the way his voice changed when he said, "Let me handle this." The dog found it first, a length of wire, twisted like a noose, tucked under the brush near the garden shed. Their golden retriever, Maya, sniffed it out and yelped before Logan pulled her back. It wasn't there the day before. He didn't sleep that night, just sat near the window, lights off, watching at 3:17 a.m. The street lamp flickered. A sedan rolled by. Slowed, no headlights. No music. Just one long quiet coast past their property, then gone. The next morning, another note. This one was different. Typed. Sealed in an unmarked envelope. Sarah opened it first. HOA review request. Non-compliant structure noted immediate attention. Required. Attached was a grainy photo of their backyard shed, taken from an odd angle, high and to the left, not from the street, from inside the neighbor's yard. Logan took the paper without a word. He studied the angle, the timestamp, the shadows. "You think someone came into our yard again?" Sarah asked, already nervous. "I think they never left." He replied, calm but tight. Logan hadn't been trained to panic. He'd been trained to observe, wait, and respond with precision. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't bureaucracy. Someone had taken an interest in their home, and they were escalating carefully, quietly, and without fingerprints, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. The next notice didn't come on paper. It came in the form of 2 men, both wearing matching blue polo shirts with nothing on them but a stitched emblem. Cypress Hollow Enforcement Division. No name tags. No HOA branding. Just a title stitched in dark gray thread. They showed up mid-morning while Logan was out grabbing supplies. Sarah was in the garden, pruning the rose bushes by the side fence, when the 2 men walked in, not knocked, not called out, just opened the gate and stepped inside like they belonged. The taller one, maybe mid-40s, with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses, spoke first. "Afternoon, ma'am. Got a notice here for a non-permitted structure," he said, tapping a clipboard. "That shed out back. Doesn't meet visual compliance. Needs to be relocated or dismantled." Sarah stood up, confused but polite. "We've already submitted pictures. It was approved before we moved in." The second man didn't speak. He walked toward the shed, brushing past her like she was in the way. His steps were slow, deliberate, hands in pockets, but shoulders squared, watching the shed but also watching her. "Did I invite you in?" Sarah asked, her tone sharper. "Now. You didn't need to," the first man replied. "As enforcement officers, we're allowed perimeter access." She didn't argue, but her eyes followed them closely. When they left, they didn't say goodbye. They didn't even look back. The gate clicked shut behind them, and they were gone. When Logan came home and she told him what happened, he didn't raise his voice. He just stood still for a long moment, then walked out the back door with a flashlight in hand. Even though it was still daylight, he crouched near the base of the shed, checked the soil around it, the lock, the hinges, then, almost like instinct, he swept the back of his hand across the window ledge. Dust. Except for one spot, a clean smudge the size of a thumbprint. They were looking inside. He said flatly. That night, he checked the camera feeds. One had gone offline for 43 minutes. Another still recorded, but the footage jumped a subtle skip. Barely noticeable unless you were looking. He was. A few hours later, he pulled a ladder from the garage and climbed onto the roof. From the ridge, he had a full view of the backyard, the fence line, and the neighbor's property on the left. A small glint caught his eye, something metallic, wedged just inside the eaves of the neighbor's roofline. A camera, a wireless one, angled perfectly to see over their fence. Logan climbed down, walked back into the house, and wrote a note, just 2 lines, taped to the inside of their back window facing the neighbor's direction. This is a warning. I don't call police. I handle things myself. The next morning, the neighbor's blinds were closed for the first time since they moved in, but the pressure didn't ease. It shifted. The following evening, Sarah found the shed door slightly ajar. She was certain she had locked it. Logan examined the latch. Scratches, not forced entry, picked. Nothing stolen, just disturbed. He didn't report it. He didn't speak to the HOA. He changed the lock. Reinforced the shed with an interior bracket only he knew about. Installed a second set of motion sensors, hidden under the eaves. And then he waited. Because something had changed. They weren't just enforcing rules. They were looking for something. At exactly 2:12 a.m., the sensor behind the shed lit up. Logan opened his eyes before the soft chime even sounded. He didn't rush. He reached to the nightstand, pressed the small remote that switched all outside lights to blackout mode, and moved silently through the house. He didn't grab a weapon. Not yet. Instead, he opened the security feed on his phone. One camera behind the shed, another near the gate. A shadow moved. It was deliberate, slow. Whoever it was had studied the yard, first stepping only on the narrow slate path, avoiding grass and leaves. Whoever it was had done this before, but they hadn't planned on Logan being trained to see the details. The figure moved to the shed. Tall, lean, hoodie, pulled low. They crouched by the side panel, then pulled something out from a back pocket. Slim, metallic. A tool. Logan had seen that motion before. Lockpick. Instead of confronting him, Logan waited. The figure worked fast. 10 seconds. Click. The door creaked open. The shed's motion sensor caught the movement, but the man was inside before it triggered. Inside, the shed was empty, except for a few tools, camping gear, and the brackets Logan had bolted in place. Last week, steel rods aligned with an interior cage designed to trap an intruder inside. Once inside, and the door closed. They weren't leaving without help. Logan waited for the door to close. Then, slowly, he stepped out of the back patio door. His boots didn't make a sound. When he reached the shed, he stood just outside the door and listened. Inside, the figure was rustling, searching. There was a soft click, probably a flashlight. Then movement toward the back wall. Logan reached for the outer latch and slipped the bracket into place. One tug locked from the outside. There was no sound at first, then a soft bang, another then, finally, the voice. Hey man, let me out. Calm, not panicked. Logan didn't respond. He walked back to the patio, sat in a chair, and waited with his arms crossed. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. The man inside banged louder, rattled the metal. Logan finally stood, walked back to the door, and said quietly, "You have 60 seconds to explain what you're doing on my property." The voice came back fast. "Look, it's a mistake. I thought it was someone else's yard. I was just looking for my cat." "You brought a lockpick for your cat?" Logan asked. No answer. No answer. Another moment passed before Logan undid the latch and opened the door. The man inside stepped out, hands up. A black face covering hung from his neck. His eyes didn't meet Logan's. He didn't say a word. Logan didn't ask his name. He didn't need to. He followed him down the driveway, watched the man turn the corner on foot. No vehicle parked nearby. The silence of the street said one thing clearly. This wasn't the first time, but it might be the last. Logan didn't go back to bed. He checked every camera. saved every feed, backed up every file to a secure cloud folder. Then he returned to the shed, checked the man's movements. Nothing stolen. But something felt disturbed, like someone had been trying to find a specific item, maybe a file, a recording, or even a hidden stash. Except Logan hadn't hidden anything in the shed. Not yet. When Sarah woke that morning, she found Logan already at the dining table, blueprint sketches spread out in front of him. "Is it time?" she asked. He nodded once. "They're not going to stop." She didn't argue. She poured coffee and sat beside him. The real preparations had just begun. Sarah had just started to trust the silence again. For a week, there were no notes, no strangers, no shadows at midnight. Even the neighbor who always watched from behind. The blinds had vanished. Logan kept monitoring, kept refining the angles of the security system. But the tension in the house had eased, at least on the surface. Logan knew better. Retreats weren't always surrender. Sometimes they were setups. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The air was dry and still. Sarah had just stepped out to water the side flower beds when a car rolled up without sound. Not a sedan this time, an unmarked, gray SUV with tinted windows. It stopped halfway up the driveway, even though there were no signs or permits displayed. 2 men got out, not the same as before. These ones were older, broader. One had a limp that didn't match his stance. The other wore gloves, even though the sun was out. Sarah stood frozen, hose still in hand. "Can I help you?" The gloved man walked straight toward her, holding a rolled-up document. "Ma'am, you've been given final notice. Unauthorized shed structures must be removed by today." "We received no final notice," she replied, already stepping back toward the house. "This is it," he said flatly, and dropped the paper at her feet. The other man, the one with the limp, didn't speak. He stepped around her and began walking toward the backyard. Sarah moved to block him. "You need to leave. Now," she said. But he didn't stop. Instead, with a practiced motion, he grabbed her wrist and moved her aside, not enough to knock her down, but enough to jolt her. She stumbled, lost her footing on the damp soil, and landed hard on the stone edge of the flower bed. A sharp cry escaped her as her arm twisted underneath her. The gloved man turned, almost as if surprised, but the limp one just looked down at her, then walked toward the shed. Sarah struggled to stand, holding her wrist, but the pain shot up her elbow. She leaned against the sidewall, dizzy. That was when the neighbor across the street saw it happen. The one who always looked away. But this time, she didn't turn. She raised her phone. A photo snapped. Then another. The 2 men didn't notice. The shed door creaked open again. The limp man ducked inside. The gloved one stood guard by the path. When Logan returned 10 minutes later, the SUV was gone. He found Sarah on the couch, cradling her arm in a dish towel. Her eyes dry but unreadable. He didn't ask questions right away. He helped her ice the wrist, checked for swelling, and only after making sure she was stable did he speak. "Tell me exactly what happened." She did. Word by word, nothing exaggerated. No guesses, just details. Logan listened without interrupting. Then he stood up, went to the garage, and closed the door behind him. Inside, he opened the storage cabinet that no one else had touched, the one with the second latch hidden behind the support beam. He retrieved a small dust-covered bag and unzipped it slowly. It wasn't anger in his hands. It was calculation. Later that night he pulled the camera feeds again. The SUV's plates were partially visible. The timestamps matched the neighbor's photos. There was audio, too faint, but enough. The limp man had said 3 words before leaving the shed. He moved it. Logan paused the video, rewound, played it again. He hadn't moved anything. The shed had been untouched, so whatever they were looking for wasn't there, which meant they were following a rumor, or chasing a lie, or acting on a threat. Either way, they had crossed a line, and Logan didn't believe in second warnings. By the time morning light crept over Cypress Hollow, Logan had already mapped out everything he needed. He hadn't slept. While Sarah rested with her arm bandaged and tucked in a sling, Logan sat at the dining table with 3 laptops open and a legal pad filled with notations. One screen showed archived HOA records he'd decrypted from the association's online portal. Another played silent loops of security footage. The third was a video call window, frozen on a paused frame. The face of someone from Logan's past. He clicked play. Still quiet Logan. A voice came through deep, worn, familiar. "Not anymore." Logan replied, His contact's name was Grant. A former SEAL turned digital forensic specialist. They hadn't spoken in 6 years. No reason to. Until now. Logan uploaded 2 video files and 1 photo, the SUV's license plate, the backyard intrusion, and the exact moment one of the men grabbed Sarah. Grant didn't ask unnecessary questions. I'll pull the registration. Facial match might take a few hours, but I'll scrub HOA records too. You said this Keller woman's the president. On paper, I don't think she's the one pulling strings. Grant raised an eyebrow. You think they've got private enforcement? I think they've got something to hide, Logan answered. Hours passed. Sarah woke to find the house dark but humming. She stepped into the kitchen, her arms stiff, to see Logan standing over a stack of printouts, financial ledgers, property sales, records, and old legal disputes involving the HOA. The patterns were there now. The same names appeared again and again. Keller, Bramson, Whitlock. 10 homeowners had been cited for non-compliance in the last year. 8 of them had sold their homes within 2 months of being fined. All 8 had paid thousands in exits, assessments, charges that didn't exist in the official bylaws. The money was funneled into a third-party contractor, Cypress Hollow Enforcement Solutions. A shell name, no website, no phone number, just a P.O. box, and all of it linked back to a quiet investment fund based out of a downtown office suite. A fund run by Diane Keller's son. By nightfall, Grant called back. You're not going to like this, he said. One of your visitors, former corrections officer. Other one kicked off a private security contract 3 years ago for use of force violations. Both were paid under Cypress Hollow's community improvement budget. I got the files. Logan nodded. Calm as ever. What now? Grant asked. I set the bait, Logan said. That evening, Logan walked the shed out to the curb. He didn't roll it. He disassembled it carefully, plank by plank, and stacked each piece by the mailbox with a large wooden sign painted in red. For collection, nothing left inside. Then he waited. At 2:47 a.m. The camera caught movement, the same SUV, the same men, but this time they didn't enter the yard. They parked 2 houses down and waited, watching, possibly recording. Logan stepped out onto the porch, lit by nothing but the faint spill of a street. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, arms folded, and stared in their direction. The SUV pulled away. That was confirmation. They weren't looking for a shed, they were looking for something they thought Logan had taken. But Logan didn't have what they were after, and now, he realized something worse. Someone had told them he did. Someone close. The next phase wouldn't be defense, it would be exposure. Logan didn't storm the board. He didn't make threats. He didn't shout. That was what they expected, emotional retaliation, reckless reaction. Instead, he slipped into the HOA's next scheduled board meeting without a sound. It was held in a staged community center that looked more like a real estate showroom than a decision-making hub. Full leather chairs. Brochures in neat racks. Walls decorated with stock photos of happy families. Only 4 board members were present. Diane Keller presided at the end of the table, flanked by 2 men and a woman who barely looked up from their tablets. Logan didn't announce himself. He walked to the front table and placed a sealed manila envelope in front of each of them. Quietly, without speaking, Keller blinked. Can we help you with something? Logan didn't answer. He nodded once, turned, and left the room. Inside, each envelope was a single printed image, a time-stamped still from the security camera footage, showing Sarah's injury, accompanied by a list of unregistered contractor payments, bank routing information, and copies of whistleblower complaints that had been buried in HOA records for years. By morning, 2 of the board members had resigned. No statements. No explanations, but the silence wasn't submission. It was panic. Logan wasn't finished. He emailed every homeowner in Cypress Hollow using a list Grant had extracted from the HOA database. The message was short, factual, with no accusations, only proof. He attached a copy of the financial trail linking the board to the private enforcers, and a folder containing footage from the shed incident and Sarah's confrontation. Then, without warning, the story exploded. A local news outlet picked it up, a freelance reporter, probably one of the homeowners who received the file. By noon, reporters were parked outside the community entrance. Residents gathered in front yards. Conversations once whispered were now wide open. Diane Keller didn't show her face that day, but others did. Neighbors who had been silent now spoke. One by one, they stepped forward. Each story built on the next. Threats disguised as reminders, unexplained break-ins, sudden finds that led to panic sales. Logan walked the neighborhood as they talked. Not as a hero but as a man they could no longer ignore. He didn't smile. He didn't ask for thanks. He simply took note of who still looked away. That evening, he received a letter. Not taped to the door. Not dropped off anonymously. Certified mail. No return address. Inside was a plain sheet of paper. 7 words. Back. Off. This doesn't concern you anymore. No signature. No threat. Just the implication. Logan read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it into a folder already thick with evidence. He sat beside Sarah, who still wore her sling but had begun moving her fingers again. Is it them? She asked. It's someone else, Logan said, and he meant it. The timing didn't make sense. The HOA board was fracturing. The security contractors were under investigation. But this letter, this wasn't cleanup. This was escalation. Someone outside the neighborhood had just stepped in. Maybe a financial partner. Maybe a silent investor in the shell fund. Whoever it was, they wanted Logan out of the game. Which meant the most dangerous part hadn't even started. The letter hadn't shaken Logan, but it confirmed what he already suspected. This wasn't just about rules or money. Someone was watching him now, not as a nuisance, but as a threat. 2 nights later, the neighborhood's silence felt wrong. The kind of stillness that didn't come from calm, but from retreat. As if every house on the street was holding its breath. Even the air seemed heavier, like the weather knew what was coming. Logan had already moved Sarah to a hotel under a different name. She didn't argue. The look in his eyes that morning told her everything. He'd fortified the house, not with alarms or visible cameras, but with layers only someone with his training would think to install. He knew how to make a home look vulnerable while being anything but. At 3:11 a.m., the power went out. Clean cut, not a storm, not a blown fuse. Planned. Logan stood in the dark, barefoot calm. He already had backup systems. His night vision ready cameras kept rolling silently on a separate battery rig. The screens in the back hallway glowed soft green. 3 figures entered the yard. One scaled the side fence with practiced ease. One came through the back gate, unlocked. On purpose. The third waited by the driveway. They moved fast and quiet, like professionals. Not board members. Not hired muscle from a neighborhood committee. This was something else. Logan waited by the basement door. Just beyond their entry line, one of the men broke away from the others, circling around the side of the house, approaching the very window where Logan stood invisible in the shadows. He wore dark clothes. Tactical vest, radio earpiece. Logan recognized the gear. Recognized the walk. This wasn't some suburban enforcer. This was ex-military. The man slipped a small device against the window frame scanner, likely for hidden electronics. He never saw the fishing line stretched across the flower bed. A soft click. The soundless flare that followed lit him up in infrared. Now Logan knew where they all were. He didn't shout, didn't confront. He moved with the kind of silence that had earned him his rank. Looping around through the crawlspace tunnel he'd widened months ago when remodeling the house as the second man stepped onto the patio. Logan emerged behind him, pressed a flat rod against his back. Don't move. The man froze. You don't want to do this. Logan leaned closer, his voice level. You picked the wrong house. The man turned his head slowly. We just want what you took. I didn't take anything. It's not personal. Neither. Is this? Logan pressed the rod harder, not a weapon, but a sensor jammer. The man's radio went dead in his ear. His expression flickered, first confusion, then fear. At that moment, the third man, still by the driveway, started to move toward the house. But headlights swept across the road. A neighbor's car. Maybe. Just in time. All 3 vanished before the vehicle could stop. By the time the police arrived, called in by the neighbor who'd seen movement and lights, there was no sign of forced entry. No suspects. Just a sealed envelope resting on Logan's doorstep. Inside. A photo. It showed Sarah at a grocery store from earlier that day. The image had been taken from a car window, slightly blurred, but unmistakable, and on the back, handwritten in blue ink. Next time, we won't miss. Logan didn't flinch. He simply slipped the photo into the folder. The message wasn't just for him anymore, it was bait, and he was done waiting. The final play was coming, and he would choose the field. The photograph changed everything. It wasn't just surveillance. It was a declaration. not of war, but of arrogance. They thought fear would make him back down. They thought threatening Sarah would end the fight. They had no idea who Logan really was. For 3 days, he said nothing publicly. He didn't attend the emergency HOA board meeting called to address the recent resignations. He didn't respond to the investigators' phone calls. He didn't even answer Grant, who had sent for messages asking if he was okay. He wasn't retreating. He was finishing the job. Logan's final play started with a single thumb drive. He mailed it to 3 people, a local journalist who had started digging, a state oversight official quietly investigating HOA corruption, and an attorney specializing in real estate fraud. Each drive contained the same data: financial evidence, security footage, voice recordings from tapped phone lines, and encrypted correspondence between Keller's shell companies and out-of-state investors. Logan didn't just expose a neighborhood power grab, he revealed an illegal asset stripping scheme targeting retirees and veterans through falsified violations and property coercion. By the time the story hit the regional news, Logan had already packed Sarah's things, not to run, to get her out of the blast zone. The arrests came swiftly. First, Diane Keller, booked on wire fraud and conspiracy to commit extortion. Then her son, picked up while boarding a flight out of state. Over the next 2 days, 4 more names surfaced to board members, one local contractor, and a financial manager who had funneled HOA funds through falsified expense accounts. But that wasn't the end, because Logan wasn't just after justice. He wanted to know who sent the men. The ones who entered his property. The ones who took that photo of Sarah. The trail didn't lead to Keller, it led beyond her, to a silent partner whose name hadn't appeared in any HOA document, a private equity executive who had quietly acquired interest in over a dozen HOA communities statewide. Their method: install weak leadership, apply pressure, flip properties under duress, and resell them at premium prices to their own network. It had worked everywhere except Cypress Hollow, because this time, the pressure landed on a man who didn't scare. Logan didn't confront the executive. He didn't leak his name. He just mailed a second envelope, this one with a full printout of the man's corporate holdings, offshore accounts, and internal memos from seized devices. And one simple note: come again, and the next letter goes public. There was no response, but 2 days later, Logan received a message from Grant. Shell company dissolved. Accounts frozen. No further movement detected. That was all Logan needed. Cypress Hollow changed after that. Not overnight, but visibly. The HOA board was dissolved by court order. A temporary trustee took over and began auditing every violation, refunding every illegal fine, and removing every enforcement clause that had been added without vote. The enforcers disappeared. The house, still standing. Sarah returned with him 1 week later. No threats, no strange cars, no more letters, just wind through the trees and the sound of a place finally exhaling. As they unpacked the last box, Sarah looked at him and asked, "Do you think they'll ever try again?" Logan looked around the quiet street, then toward the shed he had rebuilt stronger than before, not because he needed it, but because he could. "They already did," he said. "And now they know better." He never put up cameras again. He didn't need to.